Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you I'd give it one more try. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times?
Okay, hello everybody. Alright, it is time for Chapter 2 of The Cloven Tree by C.S. Holmquist. I know the author from my youth. I'm giving his book a chance. This is only the second chapter, so we'll see where it goes. Alright, I'll get my spectacles on here, and we'll just kick back and jump right on into it, shall we? The Cloven Tree. Alright. Chapter 2, In Council. Higgins, there's a whole mess of smoke coming up from the south. Somewhere near the end of Old Higgins Trail, Bart said. 5 Tree, you think? Probably, the younger hunter said. I think it's a signal, but I'm not sure. Well, if the smoke's colored, it's a signal. If not, it ain't. That's just it. There's a bunch of colors, but they're weird, and it's starting to show normal smoke. Whoa! It just flared up like it wasn't burning at all before. What colors do you see? Higgins asked it again. Just black, white, and gray now, but before the fens rumbled with a terrific explosion. What was that? Ism asked. Someone just burned a ton of troll flesh, or I've never seen a marsh, Arsters said. Yeah, when they take to burnin', they really take, Higgins agreed. R&D, get up that tree with Bart. If they set flares to burn the trolls, the flares might be burning when the trolls are done. After nearly half an hour, the fire died down to where the smoke from what was left of the flares could be seen. Black, don't think that's normal smoke. Red, a hint of blue, yellow, orange? Purple fading to pink, or is pink another smoke? Purple's gone, Arnie rambled. He pulled a telescope out of his gear. Black's definitely a signal. It's fading, but it's definitely flare smoke. Orange is fading, all the others gone. Orange is the last one. Now just smolder smoke is left. Maybe from some kind of oil. Yeah, that's 5 tree all right. I can see the tops of it. When do you get the spyglass? Bernie asked. Last time the merchants were in. Cost me 5 coppers and 20 skins. Never mind that, Higgins said, more irritated than usual. If I'd known you had that, I'd have put you up there before. Now get down here, you two. I need to hear what you saw. Bernie, Ism, trade 'em out. They climbed down the tree as the other pair climbed up it. They both started to talk at once, and Higgins silenced them. One at a time. I know what colors you said you saw. I need to know what groups they were in. I couldn't tell, Arnie said. What about you, Bart? I think they were orange and yellow, blue, red, and black, pink and purple. Those are the ones I'm sure of. I think I saw green and white, too, but that couldn't be. Green and white? I only saw it for a heartbeat or two, the 19-year-old said. Those are odd pairs of colors, young Mackin said. Well, orange is for trolls. The chief must have gone with them. He always was partial to complicated signals, Higgins observed. Trolls found, hunters rescued, trolls taken, returning home. But what does green and white mean? That could be the heading north, one of the older... Oh, that could also be heading north, one of the older hunters said. The rest of these elders were trying to remember what the combination of green and white meant. Uncertain. Results uncertain, Arster finally remembered. It's one of the chief's old flexible signals. It hasn't been used since before he was elected. Yeah, Higgins agreed. Search incomplete. That must mean McOwen must have left the Higgins. Who'd they find then? Arnie asked. Alistair or Arnhem? Keep alert, fellas. Anything could be going on. So they didn't get any information there really at all, except a whole lot of confusing info. Slowly, the sun started westward as they waited. Throughout the day. The younger hunters were speculating. Yeah, westward, duh. Never mind me. Slowly the sun started westward as they waited throughout the day. The younger hunters were speculating about the work missed, the plans put off. The older hunters didn't waste their time on anything but the present situation. They had seen this happen before and knew all too well that it could have been them instead of Taurus Longreach. They had no proof, but was certain that Taurus was injured. This certainty did nothing for their spirits. Before joining their community, Taurus had been a dragoneer. If the Fens could get him, they could get them all. The fact that no deep rescue had been successful in the last 10 years did not help the old-timers' disposition, and gradually the younger hunters picked up on the mood. Silence fell as the day wore on. Finally, Higgins said, We're coming up on an hour of daylight left. Make ready for nightfall. The words were hardly out of his mouth when the Fens suddenly went quiet. Higgins whispered forcefully. Everyone up the trees! Bernie, keep your eyes open. Arster, Ism, ready your crossbows. But don't use them unless you hear me use mine. Up the trees, all of you. The rest of you, ready the nets. They disappeared upward, leaving Higgins alone on the ground. Straining his senses, he caught wind of something foul, worm stench with perhaps a little blood. South and west he heard something moving in the brush, moving heavily, now nearly due west. Carefully backing up, he quickly looked behind him to see if something was there, a common threat in the fens, then hid himself behind a tree. Just leaving his eyes exposed after donning a brimmed hat that kept them from reflecting any light. The rustling came closer, and after a few more seconds, a shape burst into the clearing. At first he thought the shape of it looked like a huge fen troll, large, misshapen, and threatening, but then it came into the remaining sunlight. "I'll be damned! Get down here, boys! We've got work to do!" So combining this way of killing the beast with what we have learned of the spores and the glands that make them, we have had an unprecedented level of success hunting this kind of troll. Ghoul, actually, is almost certainly a more accurate term for them, since Oliver digressed until the prince wearily interrupted him. "Yes, Master Oliver, I have heard the argument before. Is the fen troll a troll, a ghoul, a type of wight or lich, or is it actually a golem? Please, not while we are out here." Oliver assented. "To summarize, we have used this knowledge to extinct them nearly in this section of the fens. There are sections that we have barely impacted. None of us have ever been further south than 12 days into the swamps. None who could prove that they had, anyway. 7 of our community claim that they have been as far as 17 days south, beyond the salt marshes. I believed them, but they had no proof. Only 3 of them are left alive, with Garrison now dead. They would seem to be ideal for this expedition. Why were they not a part of it?" the captain asked. "One was at the mines. One of them is with Higgins at the Amber Watch. The other one is here with us." "Oh?" the prince asked. "Who?" "The town chief. Before he was elected, he was one of our best hunters. He and the others of the Deep Seven designed our signal system and rescue tactics." Who are the other two to go that far and return alive?" the prince asked. "All of them returned. The ones who died were killed later. Arster went with Higgins, and old Owen McOwen is at the mines. He's the father of the man with Mr. Taras." The prince and captain fell silent as they considered this tidbit, so Oliver let the conversation end. The trip up the Higgins was not quite as eventful as the one down to 5 Tree, but some carrion feeders were still coming to the trail. The prince and the captain both noted that the Fenlanders did not flinch from other encounters, nor did they hesitate to act on those times when the creatures surprised them, despite all their swampcraft. The crocodilians seemed particularly numerous. The prince could imagine how deadly this passage would have been if only a pair of men had gone up it. The rescue party, however, was not at great risk, and the prince had time to study the skills of the locals. The 23 crocodilians they had come upon on the journey back north were quickly distracted, killed, and butchered before they were a serious threat. The one time the prince asked one of the Fenlanders why they had not seen any snakes, he was told that snakes have the sense to avoid large parties of men, and that crocs are less particular about food and don't remember they can die. The most impressive thing to the prince was how, after killing these animals, the Fenlanders skinned the beasts on the move, it seemed. All he saw made the prince very uneasy about the reports he had been given. These people did not act like they had stolen as much as they were supposed to have. With that thought on his mind, he did not notice that they were nearly at their destination until the captain touched his arm, nodding to the chief. "We are coming back to Billy's camp," the chief said. "Make ready to climb the hill." For a moment, none but the soldiers were near them, and the prince whispered to Oliver, "How did you know who I am?" No captain would be that concerned about a fairly young noble except an heir, an important heir, not a captain of the king's guard. The Outlanders started, so Oliver explained. "Some of your men were still hiding their insignias when you arrived." The captain was about to speak when he cocked his head to the side as if listening to something distant. "What's that? Quiet, all!" he said with the authority of a veteran. A horn did sound, blowing 3 notes questioningly. "You got good ears, Captain. That's resound, please." "Hush, everyone. The town chief said, confirming the captain's order. Then from the west they heard a sound, 2 stressed notes in a pair. The second note, just slightly longer than the first, repeated 7 times. "That's recall. They've sounded recall," one of the young hunters said. Then at a closer distance the sound was repeated, and the men just above them on Billy's camp took up the signal, relaying it to the trail watches to their east. "He did it! McCowan did it! 9 miles deep, carrying a wounded man, my lord." Excuse me. That came on sudden. Ooh. Ugh. All right. He did it, McCowan did it. 9 miles deep, carrying a wounded man, my lord, the town chief said, so excited that he forgot to be embarrassed. "Do you have your heart set on sleeping in the fens tonight?" "No, but can we make it back to the village before dark?" "No, but we can reach the trail watch point by then. Every man here can find home from there, dark or not. Let me get my men off the camp. I'd like all my people inside tonight." To the others he shouted, "Make ready to run, boys, and don't lose any of our guests." The forced march they embarked upon was impressive. At first the prince worried that the trail would be too dark for quick moving, but once down from the camp they followed a sub-trail that left them in the sunlight from the west until they came to the broad section just south of the trail watch. As predicted, they reached the 1-mile point before sunset. The trail watch had heard them coming and had waited for them. "Barnd, Kelbert," the chief said, "each of you count with me and make sure there are 28 of us." All 3 counts agreed at... I'm sorry, where did I get 28? 98 is the word number he said. I don't know, sorry, I don't know how I read that as 28. All 3 counts agreed at 98, which included the prince, the soldiers, the rescue party from the village, the team of men left to overwatch at Billy's camp, and the 5 hunters rescued at 5 Tree. Then the 10 men of the trail watch fell in with them, Kelbert and Barnd at the end of the column as they left the fens. The last mile was quickly crossed, the locals knowing the way by heart, with the visitors following their lead. "Ho, Fentown, open up," the chief called. "What's the password?" a young voice called back. "I didn't set a password, you ninny. You know I didn't." "Is that you, Mayor?" the young voice shouted back. A string of expletives and invective phrases poured from the town chief's lips with emotional eloquence. The captain was impressed. The prince actually paled. "Yep, that's the mayor," another said in a carrying sotto voice. I think that's a typo. Voice is missing an I. The younger Fenlanders started laughing at the gates as the gates opened. The chief started muttering something about young bucks and senses of humor that the prince was just as happy to not really hear. Then Craster led them into Fentown. He counted everyone again, not fully relaxing until the gates were shut. Then he headed directly for the town hall. The prince and the captain followed him. "Captain," the prince stated, "stand the platoon down and have the rest of the company provide sentries for them this night. See them fed and bedded down. Tell them well done." "Captain," Craster said, "you and your men have my thanks. Tell them that if you would." The captain bowed and left. The prince and Chief Craster entered the town hall. Apparently, as the chief expected, someone was waiting to report to him. It was Red. "Chief, everyone's in. Gowan and Master Brad are looking after Mr. Taurus. Mr. Taurus was poisoned by a venomous worm. It also cracked 4 of his ribs. They say it had fangs like a snake, but the rest of it looked to be of dragon descent, even more than most." The chief was nodding. The men rescued at 5 Tree had said the same thing. Red spoke on. "The fangs didn't pierce him, but it poisoned him through his clothes and skin. Young Owen's son brought him up the Amber Trail." "The Amber? Are you sure?" She nodded. Higgins' group brought them in. I didn't believe it either, but I've seen 'em both. Where's McOwen now? He's at his brother's with Mr. Taras. Bring the other point chiefs here. Find the elders, Alistair and Arnhem too. No one else tonight, except deep hunters. She nodded, heading off. Higgins gonna be insufferable for a year, she said as she left. The chief started out of the hall, the prince following. A dwarf waited for them outside it, and he whispered to the nobleman briefly. Raising his eyebrows, the prince said, "Thank you," as he caught up with the chief. I'm going to fetch Owen, my lord. We're going to have a brief meeting about today's events. Would you care to be there? Thank you. You do not seem to mind my presence any more, the prince noted. You did well in the fens, sir. Kept your head and calmed folks down when they got excited. Not what common folks expect of nobles, if you'll pardon me saying it. I have met that kind of nobleman, chief. Quite often that expectation is too accurate. Thank you for the compliment. It has been a busy day. I would think that you would want to rest and start the review of events tomorrow. The chief shook his head. This is the first rescue in a dozen years or so that worked. Deep rescue, anyway. We need to find out what went right. Noting the prince's shock, he elaborated. That surprises you, my lord? This isn't an easy life. In some ways, it's gotten harder. We've killed off most of the trolls, and now the crocs have bred to fill the gap. Some other reptiles too. They're more pleasant to deal with than the trolls, but harder to kill, when you get right down to it. The big worms stay further and further south, most of them, and they have the only skins that we know we can sell. Then there are the blasted merchants. Most of the time we couldn't beg for good prices if the sky turned to gold. Then the fens always have diseases and snakes, little ones that are usually poisonous. Bugs, too. Fens always got plenty of bugs. I have heard much about these merchants. Surely they cannot be as ruthless as that. You must be exaggerating at least somewhat. The chief shook his head. Wish I were. Do you see that hill, my lord? The prince nodded. It isn't a hill. It's a warehouse full of hides that we couldn't sell. We had to cover it with sod and sawdust to keep them from rotting entirely away. We've got nearly half a dozen warehouses like that, with hides packed in salt when we had no other choice, or in ice when we could get it. Where would you come by ice this far south? We get a little in really cold winters. Most of it, though, came from an iceberg that reached the end of the Splitting Sea about 8 years ago, maybe 10. It took an all hells of a lot effort, but we salvaged tons of ice then, packed it in sawdust and wool, buried it in places that don't get much sunlight. Most of it we took to our new mine and buried there in an old shaft. 7 men died during that. If this is such a hard life, why stay here? Don't know where else to go. We were slaves, most of us, mining a mine that makes the one we got here look prosperous. Not fit stone for an orc's cairn. I remember more than one dwarf saying about the stone we mined there. This ain't nothing compared to that. Besides, the High King, God bless him, went to a lot of effort to free us, and Kingsman died. You can't give up freedom once you got it. I just wish I knew why the High King stopped supporting us and withdrew the commissioners. Do you know why, my lord? The question was asked with such honest emotion that the prince nearly revealed himself. His training to not make decisions in haste at last won control, and he held his tongue. No, I don't, chief. Ah, well, he's the High King, and I suppose he had to do it, but it would be nice to find out why. At that comment, the prince changed the subject. What is that odor, chief? Ah, we're almost to Gowan's house. He's our best alchemist. Does quite a bit of work with the venoms of the local critters. He's not bad in the fens, neither. They came up to another of the stone frame, sod-ceiled and roofed buildings that seemed everywhere in this village. The chief knocked twice quietly upon the door and then entered. Entering the front room behind the chief, the prince saw a man upon a couch asleep, one of the biggest men he had ever seen. The man was over 6 feet, half a foot perhaps, but he seemed at first to be as broad as he was tall, and nearly as bulky as a dwarf. When the prince had adjusted to the lighting, he realized that the man was slightly curled up on a couch that was just a little too short, so that his height looked like it was equaled by his 4 feet of width. He was very thick in the frame as well, though he couldn't see exactly how muscled. The prince thought that the man did not have any fat on his body. For an instant he had an irrational desire to see how strong this man was. Suppressing that, he thought to himself, No, he is too young. My age at most. Another man entered the front room, and the prince was surprised again. He had been expecting Gawain to be an older man, but the man who he saw was no more than 25. Looking from the man on the couch to the other, the prince for a moment thought them twins, but realized that the sleeping one was older by a year or two at the least. "Gawain," the chief said, "I didn't knock loud, so's I didn't disturb anyone. How is he?" "Mr. Taras is unconscious. My brother had to give him broad-spectrum medicines. We have to wait to see how much of the poison they eliminate before the antivenom I am making can be dosed. He's stable and breathing upon his own, and we have given him fluids. Brad is trying to remove more of the venom now." "But he was bit hours ago," the chief said. "He was poisoned hours ago," Gawain corrected. "This venom is very resilient. It does not break down quickly. If it had made it directly into his blood, he almost certainly would have been killed, just like Mr. Garrison. Would any of my mages be useful, Master Gawain? Also, I could send some ministers." "Thank you, my lord. That would be most helpful. Please do." "How's Owen?" "Scratched, tired, bruised, and he's going to have many blisters, but other than that, he's fine." "Do you need him further?" "No. Agwin and Elwyn brought more than enough venom to make a serum. All I needed from Owen was my patient." Shaking the man on the couch awake, the chief said, "Owen, wake up. We have to talk about the day's happenings. Come to the town hall." "Do you want me to bring Agwin and Elwyn?" "Why not? They won't say much, but they've earned it." When I came to the... I guess it's kind of changing gears here. When I came to the edge of the bog, I was coming out of the reeds. It was over 50 feet long, maybe 80 feet or more. Was of a serpentine drake lineage, mostly from how it looked, and its hide was a very ugly shade of yellow. It had a long neck and at least 4 wings that I could see, none of them big enough to do anything with. Since it was so different, I bolted it in the mouth, because its heart could be anywhere. If it only had one. It reared to strike, its jaws unhinged like a snake about to swallow some eggs. That was a shocking sight. Gave me a better shot, too. Went right through the fangs and into the skull. The bolt must have gone through the lower brain or spine, because the beast fell over dead without a twitch. We treated Mr. Taras for poisons. Strong venom it must have been, since it had already taken the feeling from his leg. Once we treated him, I sent the boys up the trail, after they bottled some of the venom. "This is the worm that killed my dad?" Garrison asked. Alistair spoke. "I saw your dad's vembrace stuck in its teeth. Left it there in case we didn't make it out." The new patriarch of the Garrison family grunted. Owen spoke again. "We slogged up the new Higgins for about 3 hours. I had to treat him again. A big croc came at us, and while I kept it from biting me down, Mr. Taras put one of my bolts through its lungs. Then I was able to stand up and get out of its mouth." Breaking its jaws in the process, Armand said. Blacksmithing and carrying cattle made you strong, Owen. The prince could not keep from interrupting at that point. You carry cattle? Yes, lord, he replied tiredly. If you pick it up every day from the day it's born, you'll be able to pick it up when it's full grown. Sometimes you have to get 'em out of a flooding bog and may not have time for anything fancy. We don't have enough to spare any. I started picking up calves when I was recovering from muscle fever. Never stopped. Anyway, we heard the carrion shriekers behind us and in front of us on the Higgins. Mr. Taras reminded me of old Garrison's theory about the fens knowing when a hunter's injured. I left a marker and went to the next trail, but we heard shriekers there too. They've learned to talk to each other. So I cut west to Snake Country and ran up the Amber. Why'd you go through there? Guard asked. Go easy on him, Arster said, sensing Owen's stress. It worked. Go on, Owen. Well, we didn't hear any shriekers. Snake Country's got less chance of trolls. Snakes don't bother you unless they're hunting or cornered, and Mr. Taras wasn't getting any better. We had a couple of close calls, but Dad taught me well. I think, and I've got good gear. After the last one, I kept going. We came into a clearing. Higgins scared the hell out of me, and then I learned how far I'd gone. Sounds good, lad, and we ain't got any reason to disbelieve you, the chief said. Good job, Owen, good job. He looks about ready to fall over, and his little brothers are asleep again, Armand said. Heater took over the meeting. That's enough for tonight. Owen's story'll give us plenty to sleep on. Don't argue with me, Craster. You're as tired as anybody else. Alistair, Arnhem, did you hear the carrion shriekers Owen was talking about? They nodded. Their cries did sound different, Arnhem confirmed. Then that'll definitely be enough for now. We've an idea why the deep hunters have been so vulnerable. Everyone's out of the fens, and we're as sure as we can be for now that Garrison's killer's dead. All of you did well in the fens, he said, including the chief and the prince in his comment. Now get some sleep and come back in the morning after you've eaten. The prince found the morning's council meeting quite different from the one the night before. The chief had limited the number of people in the evening council so that they could cover a large quantity of information thoroughly with a minimum of formality and interruption. The entire village seemed to be present at the morning council, but for a summary of what had been happened the day before, every report was interrupted half a dozen times as different members of the community asked questions, and the elders kept a minimal grasp on whatever rules of order they used to keep their meetings organized. Slowly, every point of view was examined, from the men left in the Overwatch to the hunters trapped at 5 Tree to the Trail Watch leaders. Higgins was the last of these, and gave his report right as the morning was ending. We figured it was a mess of trolls being burnt, and figured that the signals meant they weren't sure about what Owen was doing. We waited till about an hour before sunset, then we thought something was coming. Had my men climbed the trees in case it was a big worm or a troll or something. Then Owen stepped into the clearing. So we definitely need to freshen everyone up on our signals. If only Arster and Higgins figured out the signal, how come the rest of you didn't head in when you heard the explosion? We didn't hear recall, Red said simply, and the other Trail Watch chiefs nodded in agreement. A village elder spoke, one that the prince had not seen the day before. That's not surprising. It's been 7 years since any of the black signals have been used, and closer to 20 since green and white burned together. But it's almost noon now. I think we should think about lunch. Mr. Taras! Every eye in the hall turned to the door to see a man in a robe and a man with a smock over his leathers bring another man come to the front of the meeting hall. Mr. McOwen, the man replied. I heard you had a bad day yesterday. The injured man smiled. He was wearing a loose-fitting robe, a loose shirt, and short pantaloons. Gowan and Owen saved me, though. You should be proud of them. I am. Hard to believe that it's been 10 years since you started training them. Do you need food or rest? No, the healers think that I'm ready to recount yesterday's events, though it will be days before I'm fully recovered. Higgins, the counselor said, bring the guest chair up to Mr. Taras so Mr. Taras can use it. I don't think we need to make him stand to report today, he said, referring to their law of council, and if Mr. Taras can talk now, I think we can wait for food. At a nod from each man who had accompanied Taras, Gowan and Brad, the prince surmised, the council waited for Taras to seat himself, and he began to tell of the events that led to his rescue by Owen. His recollection was encyclopedic, as he started with the death of old Garrison and explained in exquisite detail his hunt for the worm. After 2 hours he came to the end of the hunt. Bolt not only went through the bone, but it also stopped the head from falling forward. It fell to the side, missing me by 20 feet at least. The rest of the events blur in my mind, and undoubtedly you have heard them from someone else, so I will stop here. That's a good memory you have, Heater said. Part of my training as a Dragoneer is memory enhancement and detail recall. How was it able to surprise you? Heater asked, and Garrison. We underestimated it. It was what in my old profession we would have called a half-drake, a half-dragon, for it could speak a very poor but understandable dialect of Dalian Drakish, the most common tongue among the great worms. I unthinkingly spoke in that tongue after it dropped me, and it replied. Then Owen killed it. He chuckled ironically. To think I once told him that design of crossbow was too powerful to be practical. Thank you, Mr. Taras, the chief said, again trying to control his dialect, and for once succeeding. Do you have anything else to say? Yes. Questions, at any rate. Why did a company of the King's Guard arrive in the village? Why are they uniformed as common soldiers? Why does a master dragoneer accompany them? Standing from the chair, he faced the prince. And why, above all, does a son of the house of Wintherian High King pretend to be a minor nobleman? Okay. And that's the end of that chapter. It was a bit shorter than last time. So, and I'm only going to read one chapter at a time in this. So, yeah. It looks like the next chapter is about the same length. So, yeah, that's all right. 40 minutes, roughly, per chapter. I can handle that. We'll keep on plugging away at it, and it's more interesting this chapter than the first one, honestly. We'll see where it goes, if it picks up. Heck, by the end of it, it might just knock our socks off, so we'll see. All right, that'll be it. Let's see. We raided Vesper last night. So we got Biddy 6501 doing something retro. Count BB playing Fallout 4. Horizon Zero Dawn. I have not seen that, and I've been thinking about playing it. So let's go over there. That will be Mr. Blitzer. So bear with me, and I will see you over there.
My heart is beating. I know the pieces. One is broken, one is beat. Because I have seen the fall. I have known about the body. I didn't have anything to say. Follow your heart, don't take no answers. Don't know without you. How relax.
Yeah, blood splat's a lot of fun.